Mwah. Mwah. Yeah. Aww.
Ahsaas?
What?
What are you doing?
Arey? February is all about self-love, isn't it?
Yes. So what are we doing on Limitless by Westside?
So today we're talking to Aastha Khanna Bhardwaj, who's India's first certified intimacy coordinator for film and TV. And she's not just an intimacy coordinator for Bollywood, but an intimacy coach for your life. Let's go. Hi Aastha.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited for this conversation.
As am I.
The Fresher Fair at University of York in England.
Yeah. Oh my God. You know this story.
Yes, you said that when you were choosing, when you were asked to choose a society that you want to be associated with, the most colorful and the most, the vibrant and the most fun was
Attractive one.
Attractive stall was the fetishes.
Fet Sock. Yes.
What was it called again?
It was called Fet Sock, Fetish Society.
Tell
My
me.
God. Okay. I was fast friends with my college roommate. She's an Italian girl, Julia. And the two of us met each other that very day in the morning. We moved into our dorm rooms or whatever. And then we went for the Freshers' Fair. So the two of us are just standing there and we've gone through the South Asian Society and Chess Society and Math Society, and there were many societies and everyone had a stall. There was this one stall that had this person making different kinds of knots and like tying this person up, the other person up, and they were doing demonstrations of knots and ball gags, and it was just like visually very like interesting, but also sort of bordering on a little bit of discomfort within my own self with my conditioning, because as an Indian girl, just to see that it was something that was celebrated and so openly available to have a conversation around in a college, in an institution was very interesting to me. I fully went and signed up. I was like, जाना है, मुझे देखना है इसमें क्या हो रहा है. And very interesting to see that that society also changed my entire perspective of my idea of what kink and fetish is, and talking about relationships and intimacy and sex is all about. Like, it completely changed my perspective from feeling like, oh my God, it's a bad thing, people don't talk about it, happens behind closed doors, anybody that talks about it is like a horse situation, to going like, okay, 1 second, anybody that is involved in any form of fetish or like explores fetish or kink or whatever is doing it from a place of so much personal security, is doing it from a place of so much the intention of growth and exploration, but also in an environment that is made safe and very brave.
Yeah.
So that was super interesting.
Correct. Which is why I wanted to ask, you must have also seen like a major shift in India and in Europe or like in the US, where like conversations about sex or intimacy or fetish for that matter, how different is it?
In all of the different places that you speak of, majorly the West all of them have a conservative society. There is one part of the society that is conservative. Whether it's in the US, then there is the Christian, very orthodox Catholic society that is very, very conservative and extremely shaming in a lot of ways to conversations around intimacy or even gender and sexuality. But the West, having had the movement of allowing that liberal space for conversation around intimacy and gender and sexuality, and the feminist movement having happened in those parts of the world, it's been there for much longer than it has been India. And also in India, when we're speaking of bubbles and pockets of this modern society, which is what, 1% of our country. Not even. The rest of the country is very conservative when it comes to this conversation. And a lot of it has to do with conditioning. A lot of it has to do with the history of the country that we belong to. There is very stark difference in the way that you get to exist in those different worlds.
Which brings me to my next question, which is another story that I know of you, is that in 11th grade, you were just fooling around.
Okay, so a friend of mine and I thought it would be super funny that if we kissed each other on the lips, that the other girls in the class would find it super scandalous and it would be super funny. We were not attracted to each other. We were not trying to explore. It was just for eyeballs and for fun. I'm taking no responsibility for what I did when I was not an adult. So it happened. There's this kid in our class who had, because class 11 mein, again, you get a lot of kids from different schools. So this kid didn't know us. So they didn't know that we were the drama kids that did natak. But this new kid was very shocked by this, by having seen two girls whose lips have touched each other. And very perturbed by this, that they went to tell the teacher, ye mere class mein, this is what's happening. And that teacher also, don't know what came upon her. She decided to pull it directly to the principal. Went to the principal, told the principal has called the other girl's parents, she's called my parents, and she's like, this kind of behavior is not
Acceptable.
No, not acceptable. If this kind of behavior continues, then I might have to indefinitely suspend your daughters. Our school does not stand for da-da-da-da. मेरी फट के हाथ में आ गई थी at that point, because I was like, this was not meant to be this big of a deal.
Yeah.
But who's going to tell the principal,
Yeah.
I was just kissing her for fun.
Yeah.
My dad, however, that's the fun bit of this story, said, nobody has the right to tell you what you can and cannot do. The only thing that they can punish you for is the fact that you're in school and that certain behaviors are not encouraged in a learning environment. But the fact that they can turn around and say to me that your child is not supposed to be doing this, or like this is not accepted behavior, in a sense to imply that my child is gay and that's not okay, is something I'm not going to take.
Yeah.
Because you don't get to tell me or my child what they get to be in life. And more so, you don't get to do that to any child, because you create a hostile environment for somebody that may truly be going through that experience. हम तो मस्ती कर रहे थे. But if you create an example out of us, what you've done is you've shut the door for every other child in a school of 2,000 children and told them that this is inappropriate behavior and this is not okay. And for my father, that became the issue. And he went and straight up had that conversation with the principal and said, okay, great, but ma'am, you should know that if the girls get suspended for what you're saying they should get suspended for, you might need to be talking to the press soon.
Wow.
And when he said that, I was like, shit, my father's on my side. And of course, none of it actually escalated there, because the teachers immediately understood what their conditioning had made them say, that they immediately corrected. And it's conditioning, right? I was in an all-girls school and they may have never ever come across two girls that were attracted to each other until before that.
Yeah.
And it, in my head, sort of set the tone for what it should be like.
That, firstly, I kudos to your dad for saying something like that, because
kudos to my dad
I
for
just
a-
wanted to clap for him when you said, like, when I heard him say these things, it's just so amazing for him to say this. And for the thought that he had. You're setting an example for someone in the classroom feeling a certain way and feeling scared about it, or getting restricted for not being themselves. That's fantastic. And also for, again, then your school to like understand that.
Yeah. In that moment, he was fully like that. And then after that, both my parents turned around and said, तुम्हें बड़ा activist बनना होता है हर चीज में.
I'm 25 years old and my mom's not had the sex talk with me even today. It's something she knows that, like, it's like she
have
knows
figured
that I
it out.
know, and she's like, I don't want to have this conversation with you, which is fine. How I know about sex is that there was this friend of mine in school. We are in 10th standard and we're in a school bus. And something had come up about like babies and how babies are born and stuff like that. And he was like, no, this is not how it happens. I'll show it to you. So he's drawn diagrams and he's drawn people.
Doing it.
Yeah. And those, I'll tell you what, 50% of the information was wrong, but the diagrams were right.
Love it.
Much later when I grew up, and I realized so many things that he said were wrong. What I'm trying to tell you is that, did your parents ever sit you down and have a conversation with you about sex?
My mum had a conversation with me about sex. I would have been about 12, 13 years old. And my mum was like, okay, so Santa doesn't exist. The tooth fairy is your dad putting 100 rupees under your pillow. And let me tell you that children come like this. Of course, my parents did not, at that age, they weren't explicit about the diagram or like the genitals or that intercourse happens in a certain fashion. But I guess what my mother did explain to me is that when two people love each other, there are many ways in which that they show love. And that this act that they perform with one another should come from a place of love. And I guess that's what she was more emphatic about. It's not only for reproduction that you want a child and therefore this is how it happens. But I guess she was very clear of the fact that it is an act of pleasure and an act of exchange of emotions and love and intimacy. And that's what it should be like. And I guess through the years, at different stages, different bits of those conversations came up because both my parents were very open to the idea of me coming and asking them all sorts of questions. But they were very open to the idea of you're at an age where you will explore all of this. My father had a conversation with me about porn, which I remember, because it had reached a point where we had a PC in the house and there was an internet connection, and my parents were not both working parents and they weren't at home all the time, and they knew that kids these days will
Explore.
Google and find the weirdest of places to get information. And again, in that conversation, the thing that I remember very clearly was them talking about how respect is a huge part of intimacy. And I remember my father saying that in most scenarios that you will watch or see things on the internet, they're not coming from a place of respect and a place of equality. They realized that my school, again, and the institutions that I was in were not going to address those conversations. The first time that a conversation in school occurred about anything to do with the reproductive system or anything to do with puberty was when, I think, 3rd or 4th grade, there was this kid that ended up getting their period quicker than what others probably expected kids to get it. And when they realized that that had happened and it had created a lot of havoc in the class because nobody knew why the hell somebody's entire uniform was red, that's when they addressed the conversation around sanitary napkins and menstruation and all of that. And then the reproductive system chapter came and it went. And it was expected even at that time from me and from my peers to learn about sex elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I guess my parents felt like that was probably not the right way to go about it.
Which is why I feel like we should have more open conversation. Do you also think that we should have more open conversations about sex or consent in schools? Because I feel like a lot of, this is completely my opinion, but I feel like a lot of our problems will be solved if we just have a chapter about consent in school.
Yeah, it would save a lot of trouble, for
It
sure.
will save.
But long way to
Yeah,
go,
long
let's
way
be
to go.
very honest.
But we're getting there. At least those conversations are happening.
Within the 1% of our country.
Yeah, but we're getting there. Hopefully.
A lot of times when I go, when I talk about all of the things that I talk about, I also feel like, see, in our lives when you're living in Bombay, you speak English, you move and roam in a certain bubble, right? you tend to you feel like so much change is happening. But when you go out on the ground and you see that the world is actually really not changing at that, it's at a glacial pace that things are changing in the world around us. And actually the only thing that has probably made a huge jump is access to social media.
Correct.
Which is why it feels very good to have creators like Lisa Mangaldas or like Dr. Cuteris.
Or even you for that matter. I've seen your Instagram and you talk about all these things in a very fun way. So like these kind of things, it reaches people. And today we have social media and we have so much access to social media. So yes, getting these conversations or these topics out in school is important, but like we also have social media and people like
and
you are
access,
talking about access.
Because I feel like internet is that place where kids go and explore. So if the internet is filled with positive conversation rather than incorrect information, we probably have a faster reach in a lot of places.
Correct. Yeah. So you were working as an AD on Shakun Batra's Gehraiyan, and I think in the middle of the shoot, there was a need for an intimacy coordinator.
Shakun sent me a Vanity Fair article about intimacy coordinators, telling me that we should reach out to one of them because we have scenes of intimacy in the film. And we should try and find out what the best practices are that they're using in the West. That conversation with an intimacy coordinator who works in Hollywood led to me wanting to become an intimacy coordinator. And so I trained.
I'm so glad that this happened because you're the first intimacy coordinator in India. While you were taking that course, did you like realize or learn something that you did not already know?
A lot. I learned every day. My idea of intimacy coordination when I went into the training process was that you essentially are like an AD, but you're an AD for a scene of intimacy. So you're coordinating and you're making sure that the actors' conversations, their paperwork, everything's getting done. That was my assumption. But the more and more I trained, I realized that there is so much academic work and personality work that goes into becoming an intimacy coordinator. So the academic work is that if I don't understand the legal systems in the country of how and what we can shoot, if I'm not able to spot harassment, if I'm not able to spot trauma, sometimes people feel uncomfortable but will not tell you they are feeling uncomfortable. And there are myriad of reasons why they would not tell you, right? When you're a new person, not necessarily everyone feels comfortable to talk about how they are feeling. And of course, the external factors are that everyone's here for a job and they feel like if they're going to be hard to work with, they're not going to get jobs. So a lot of people put aside their discomfort. And it's also in some ways in our industry expected out of performers that they must feel uncomfortable in order to be good performers. In those kinds of situations, when you're dealing with an extremely vulnerable scene like a scene of intimacy, which can be, of course, it can be like a romantic scene, which is slightly sort of easier to control than a scene which has violence in it. You have to be trained in order to be able to pick up if somebody is getting triggered, but they're not saying it with their words, but their bodies are saying it, which is again, it's academic work. It's also work that involves a lot of practice because you have to go through the process of knowing when what can happen, and it has to almost become second nature, which is the personality work, which is that I can walk into a room now after having worked as an intimacy coordinator for 4 years and tell when someone's not tuned with the room. So those are all things that you learn. There was a lot of unlearning that I had to do as well because as an AD or as an assistant, you're meant to say yes to everything that your superiors are asking for. And there is a general hierarchy on set, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that was unlearning because as an intimacy coordinator, my voice not necessarily equal, but has to be loud enough to be heard so that I can echo someone's voice that isn't that loud.
Right.
And that is the job for me. I have to be able to walk into a room and have a straight up conversation with a producer or a director despite their power in that situation,
Yeah.
and talk and advocate for my performer.
There are lots of times where, inclusivity is a part of a project. Gay people having sex or like queer scenes. How do you choreograph those? Like, what is it differently that you have to do? Or is there something differently that you have to do?
There's something called intersectionality. Intersectionality is essentially an overlap of, or like a Venn diagram of different identities that people have that may or may not fall in the minority or oppressed category as opposed to the privileged category. Understanding of intersectionality in a space like India, when we talk about representation and the need for a story to be told, the most important aspect of it is understanding that any character is not just one identity. They're not just a queer person. They're not just gay, and therefore everything is stereotyped around that one identity character. That understanding allows one to better color those characters to make them more real as opposed to caricatures.
Yeah.
And when we're not caricaturing those characters, we're able to better represent their stories. Also, within the community, there is a conversation around heteronormativity. Hetero means a situation where there is a girl and a boy, where we talk about the binary of two genders. The assumption that there are only two genders. Because it is considered most regular or most normal or most seen. Enforcing or projecting behaviors that are heteronormative, which is normal to the binary world, on people in the queer space. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
Suppose there is a lesbian couple
Okay.
in the show that we're working on, and there is a clear concept in the writing only very often that one person amongst the two lesbians is more manly and one person is more feminine, or one person is more butch.
Okay.
Short hair, flannel shirt, cargo pants, gender neutral clothing, boisterous behavior, pair khule rakke, betna, whatever. And one is this like sari penna, slightly feminine, someone that could pass off in society as not lesbian. Right?
Right.
But with people with short hair, girls of that, you will automatically be like,
Hey, good job.
not very feminine characteristics
Tomboy.
going on.
Yeah.
Tomboy.
Yeah.
A tomboy only till a certain age, but then after that people are like definitely lesbian.
Ah.
Why they think like that is because everyone's assumption is these kinds of people will come together. Because there has to be a female energy and a male energy in a relationship. Not necessary. I'll give you a very cool example. Modern Family. Mitch and Cam are both very feminine and very masculine
Yes.
in their own ways. And they're a great balance, and so it's brilliant representation of a gay couple.
Yes.
You sense that neither one of them is the wife or the husband or the female partner or the male partner. So very good way of breaking heteronormativity.
That's brilliant. That's when you think of it, that's actually brilliant.
And that's what you're aiming for as an intimacy coordinator. You're aiming to create a situation which is not heteronormative and which is emphasizing intersectionality when you're creating stories that come from the community, because you don't want anybody from the community to look at it and then to feel stereotyped.
Correct.
Or to feel ostracized. If they can't relate to that character, someone from the community can't relate to that character, then you're not being a good ally in telling that story.
I did a show called Mismatch very recently, and this is the first time that I've had intimate scenes with someone. First time in life.
Great.
I was super nervous, very excited also, because I've always been an actor. So like I knew at one point I have to do this and stuff like that. I'll be very honest with you. An intimacy coordinator, this term only I've heard for the first time in the industry for me, when Gehraiyan had come out and I had heard of this and everything. So I did these intimate scenes with Taruk, who luckily I am friends with and I'm very close to. So I sort of was very comfortable in the beginning. And even when I read the script, I knew I have to do these scenes. I was like, chalo, theek hai, Taruk ke saath hi hai, we'll have this conversation. We actually did. We made fun of it. We joked about it, stuff like that, and all of that happened. So I lucked out on the fact that he was a friend and I got to do this with him and it was all comfortable. What if there are two people who don't like each other? One way is to like they're very close to each other, and because they're like best friends or probably like really close to each other, they don't want to do these scenes because they fear that this is going to hamper their relationship. Or there's another way of to put it is that there are two people who are not vibing with each other, or one of them is not comfortable with the other. How do you then deal and navigate this situation?
So we're equipped to deal and navigate a situation where two people don't know each other or are not comfortable with one another to begin with. It just so happens that we work in an industry which is like a fraternity and a lot of people know each other. You're meant to, as an intimacy coordinator, coordinate that conversation between two performers. And I do that in workshops usually, which is why workshops are an essential part of my process. That is the bit where you have the conversation around consent and around boundaries and around specific requirements of the choreography. And I'm saying this for people that don't know each other. So when that is easier than when people don't like each other, of course. Right. When people don't know each other, they're open to a process, they're open to give in to a certain system and then kind of work their way towards knowing each other a little bit better. And that's how you kind of design that workshop to make sure that they get to know each other better. And then they get to arrive at a point where they feel comfortable with the scene that we're requiring them to do. So with people don't know each other, that workshop usually is the way to kind of break that ice and go about it. But when they don't like each other, that's the tricky one. And I've had that situation happen. Correct. That's when usually activities, games, different ways of, again, in the space of workshop, kind of works. With certain people, even that wouldn't work, right? They wouldn't want to come into a workshop space with someone they don't like. And they wouldn't bring their vulnerable selves as performers to that kind of space. So in that kind of situation, you would usually end up emphasizing the fact that this is extremely technical and it is completely chalked out to be exactly how it needs to be. And then you are a little more conscious of the boundaries that each of them have. Of course, in a scenario where two people don't like each other so much that they don't want to do the scene, then you have to bring that up with the director and be like, hey, this is a problem. And then it becomes a negotiation because you're negotiating with the director on what can be done and what we can creatively bring to the table, up to what extent. I don't look at it as unprofessional or anything, which is probably where a director or a producer's mind goes to immediately, that at the end of the day, they've been hired to do this job and they must do it. But what they don't realize is the nuance of the fact that you have to bring a vulnerability to scenes like this. And when two people don't like each other, they're not actively doing things to not like each other. They're just not vibing. They're not on the same plane. And to then get the two of them to come to that same plane is very tough. Yeah. So when you get that little spark of like, this is working, come on, let's just do it this way and let's not shake the boat, not rock the boat too much, not try to push the envelope, not change up choreography last minute, because those are things that really tick people off when they're not because they're inherently not comfortable in that environment. But that's where their consent is not freely given, it's considered because they're considering the fact that they need to be doing this for a job, and they've brought themselves in an empowered situation to say, yes, I'll go through this. So while it is still consent, you have to be more careful. Yeah.
Which also just goes to show that our intimacy coordinator's job is to not just go and guard what's happening or just choreograph an intimate scene. There's lots of technicalities to it. And there's also a kit that's involved. So firstly, you tell me about the kit. And then there are terms, which is like, I want to get this right, arousal, non-concordance. Yeah. There's lots of technicalities involved. Yeah. So it sounds like a very difficult job. So tell me about all this.
It's not very difficult. It's very akin to how a stunt coordinator or a choreographer does their bit.
Yeah.
You're an expert in that particular scene, and so you have your own toolkit. Like a stunt coordinator has their fake props and their harnesses and their crash mats and stuff. We have our own kit. Our own kit essentially involves 3 different categories of things. One is called modesty garments. Modesty garments are essentially when there are scenes of nudity involved.
Okay.
You're not expecting an actor or a performer to ever walk around set completely naked. But you need the camera to catch nudity where it needs to be caught. So you're always building on a modesty garment. They can be skin-colored tights. They can be off without strapless bras, pasties, tapes.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. That's modesty garments. Then there's barriers. Barriers is essentially to add cushioning between 2 people and their genitalia so that the genitalia doesn't ever come in contact, because you're never supposed to shoot a real sex act
Yeah.
on camera. It's illegal because then it would be porn, which we're not shooting and we don't have licenses for.
Correct.
So you want to make sure that there's barriers. So a very simple example is putting a cushion between 2 people where the lower part of their body is not showing on camera.
Okay.
So essentially there's a cushion between 2 people and they're lying on top of each other, but the genitals don't come in contact with each other. So they automatically feel more comfortable to get the anatomically correct position for camera. Otherwise, what will happen? 2 people are having sex, but you can see that they're 2 feet apart.
Yeah.
And you're like,
There's no alignment.
This particular penis could not have been that long. Like, those are weird things, right? And immediately, as a viewer, you disconnect.
Yeah.
So to get the anatomy correct, you need barriers. The other reason you need barriers is because any living thing has a certain reaction, bodily reaction to stimulus. So you could go through a makeout, and somebody whose body is used to making out and then getting aroused, they may get aroused in a situation where they know that everything is professional and they're not supposed to get aroused. That can come off as a pass. It can come off as sexual harassment. It can come off to another human being and make them feel very uncomfortable in that process. So to safeguard that, we put barriers. And the third thing is hygiene equipment, which is like a nail cutter or, alcohol wipes, this, that, and the other. Just hygiene, simple hygiene equipment. So that's basically what the kit looks like.
Beautiful. And I feel like you also, with all of this, you make the performers feel comfortable. Because as a performer, you have no idea the kind of nervousness and the awkwardness, all these things that a performer goes through. But I think having an intimacy coordinator on set with these things, it just puts them so that they only have to focus on their performance and everything else. They don't really have to overthink anything and stuff like that, which is beautiful.
There is a producer, her name is Rangita Nandish, and she beautifully articulated my job role to a director. An intimacy coordinator for a scene of intimacy is essentially like your side pillow when you're sleeping. Your head pillow still remains your head pillow. Your director is never going to lose their power in that situation. It is just that there is one person on set who is looking out for you when everyone else is looking out to get their job done.
Correct.
On a film set. And as a performer, to have that support system, whether or not they require it, just the ability to exist in that space and for them to know that it is available to them is in itself, in a lot of ways, another added layer of comfort that we intend for performers to feel.
Yeah. And it's as basically like we have choreographers, we have stunt masters. So exactly like that, we have intimacy coordinators.
And you have an expert who is going to be able to see something and say that it's working or it's not working. It kind of really helps fasten the process also. You're not going about trying to figure it out at that point.
I'm going to quote you. You said that I'm the most shameless person on this planet. Now, a lot of us feel shame at a lot of times. I feel like it's necessary for us to feel a little less shameful, especially when it comes to intimacy and sex. Is there any tip that you would like to give to someone who's probably not comfortable during intimacy or is losing touch with their partner? who's maybe feeling lots of shame, just to discuss this with their partner?
Yeah, sure. So when I strive to be the most shameless person on the planet, for sure. Shame is only ever going to debilitate your ability to be vulnerable in any situation. And the idea is to exist in a space devoid of shame and in a space devoid of feeling like there's something that's bringing you down. So it's extremely important to celebrate yourself. In a relationship, that's very important. Celebrating one another. When you project shame, तुम्हें ऐसे नहीं करना चाहिए, तुम्हें वैसे नहीं करना चाहिए. I feel shame around the fact that I'm not confident in my own body and how will somebody else view me. All of these different things will disconnect you from your partner. So realizing and acknowledging your own shame is a great way to work through it. That's one. Two, in any case, in any relationship, open communication is the way to go. Bringing yourself to a point of vulnerability that can almost feel scary at some point. But realizing that you can do that in a space that makes you feel safe enough to be that vulnerable. And that's the only way that a relationship can flourish. It can grow. Removing blame.
Yeah.
But owning your feelings. So it's not you're making me do this. It's I'm feeling hurt. And when you say I'm feeling hurt, there is shame around feeling hurt. So why do you feel shame around feeling hurt? And that's when you feel shame, your defense mechanism is to blame the other person.
Understood.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm too okay, you are doing this. But I'm feeling like this, so let's find a way to not make me feel like this, maybe.
Correct.
That's probably the conversation that you're looking for in a flourishing relationship.
Beautiful. I had a lovely, lovely conversation. There's so much that I got to learn from you.
Thank you so much
Yes,
for having me.
And like I said earlier, I'm very happy that you have introduced the term and the concept of intimacy coordinator in India, and I hope there are more people take this up. And also the fact that you are a relationship and sex coach, which is beautiful. And I think a lot of people need people like you to understand all these things. So I'm just very happy that you exist.
Thank
and
you.
You're also
Thank
a
you
wonderful
so
person.
much.
I had too much fun having this chat with you.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful for this chat.